This video is going to talk about simple interest. You can calculate simple interest based on the following formula. I equals PRT, where I is the amount of interest that's earned, P is the principal, that's the original amount of money that was put down, R is the rate, that's the percentage of interest that you're earning. You'll normally see that as a percentage point, as a percentage when it's presented to you, you need to change it to a decimal point when you're using it in the equation. And T, which stands for time, typically represented in years in the equations that we've worked with. I call this equation IPERT because it's easy to remember, IPERT. Another way to remember this equation, and this is also a really good way to remember how to calculate it out, is to create a sort of pyramid with it, where you have the interest, the principal, the rate, and the time. And we're going to talk about how to use both of these things as we go along. If we have a principal amount of money of $500, and we find out that there's an account that will give 5% interest on that particular amount of money, so we put it in the bank for 3 years. Now we want to know how much money are we going to make off of this. To figure this out, we're going to plug these numbers into our IPERT formula. So we don't know what the interest is, that's what we're trying to figure out. Interest equals the principal, which is 500, times, no sign means multiplication, so times the rate, which is not going to be 5%, it's going to be 0.05 because we're converting that, times the time, which is 3 years. When we multiply all of these things together, which we're going to do one step at a time, we're going to get to our amount of interest. So let's take a look at what happens here. 500 times 0.05, is going to be 25. Then we copy down everything else. 25 times 3 is going to be 75. We could also plug this in to our triangle. So we know that the principal is 500, we know that the rate is 5% or 0.05, and the time is 3 years. Now because these are all on the same level, we're going to multiply all of these things, and we will get our interest. When we multiply all of these things, we're still going to get that $75. But you have to be very careful because that $75 is not the amount of money that's in the bank account right now. It's the amount of money that's been added to the bank account. The total amount of money that you have is $575 because you're taking the principal plus the amount of interest that you earned. So it's very important to read to make sure that you're answering the correct question. Let's take a look at one more example. Let's take a look at what happens if maybe one of the things in the formula are missing. So let's say I have a principal amount of $380 and I've put it in the bank account for 5 years. I've earned $57 in interest. What I want to know is I want to figure out what was the rate of interest. What's the rate of interest in that account? What percentage of money am I earning every term or every year? So to figure that out, we're going to plug this into the formula. My principal is $380. I started out with $380. I don't know what the rate is, so I'm just going to leave that as R. And I had it in there for 5 years. I also know that the interest earned was $57. So I'm also going to put that in the equation. And now you can see I've got a little bit more of a challenging situation here. What I have to do is I have to multiply over here. The first thing I'm going to do is multiply everything I can, which is going to be the 380 and the 5. When I multiply 380 and the 5, I'm going to get 1,900 times R. I can't forget that times R. I'm going to pull down the 57. And now what I need to do is I need to get rid of this 1900. I need to get it away from the R. And in order to do that, I'm going to divide by 1900 on both sides. Why am I doing that? Well, I'm doing that because 1900 is attached to r and it's a multiplication problem. So I'm left with r on this side, which is the rate, and over here I need to divide 57 divided by 1900. And I'm going to end up with 0.03, which means that there was a 3% interest rate on that particular account. This is figuring it out using the formula. If you choose to use the triangle up here, we're going to do the same thing that we did last time, which is we're going to set this up with I, P, R, and T on the bottom. So because I know the interest was 57, I'm going to put that on top. The time was 5 years, so that goes here. The principal was 380. And I don't know what to put in here, so I'm just going to leave that. I could put X, I could put R, some sort of variable. You multiply everything on the bottom possible, because they're all on the same level, so 380 times 5 is going to be 1900, just like we figured out before. And then, if you watch what happens here, you have 1900 under the 57. This is the fraction that we created over here. And however you choose to do this, you're still going to get 0.03 or 3% for your rate.